Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams today. It is midway through the month of November and I have quite a few books to talk about with you today. I did not end up doing a wrap up at the end of October because I only had one more book that I finished after Catch-Up-a-thon ended. So I figured I would just save it. I will start with this one and then I have 7 others to talk about with you as well. So let's just jump right in. So the last book that I read in the month of October was The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. This had been on my Catch-Up-a-thon TBR, but I just didn't get to it during the 2 weeks that Amy from Amy's Bookish Life and I hosted Catch-Up-a-thon. But I just really wanted to read this in October, and I'm so glad that I did. I say that I don't really love ghost stories, but I read this one and one other that I'll talk about in a few minutes that I just absolutely loved. So maybe I do kind of like ghost stories. This creeped me out completely at the very beginning. All of Simone St. James' books have had moments in them that were a little intense, kind of raised the hairs on my arm. This one creeped me out a lot right at the very beginning. I messaged Amy as well as Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand, who I knew had both already read this. I'm like, guys, I'm freaked out. I'm totally freaked out. Am I going to be able to handle this book? They're like, keep going. So I did keep going, and I'm glad that I did because it definitely got easier as it went on. It didn't have as many creepy parts as it did right at the beginning. So in this one, we do follow Shay, who is a receptionist at a doctor's office, but in the evenings, she runs this true crime blog, where she kind of looks up cold cases. She gets kind of obsessive about trying to figure out these cold cases. And she's been very interested in this particular case from her town back in the 70s or something along those lines, and gets a chance one day to speak with the woman who was tried and acquitted for the crimes that happened in the past, in the 70s. Yeah, in the 70s. And begins kind of this interview relationship with this woman, and again kind of becomes obsessed with the whole situation. I just love how Simone St. James, and I've said this before, I feel like she's so good at kind of peeling back the layers. So you're learning things little by little by little, but staying invested all the way through. And this was no different from the others. I absolutely loved it. Does have a little bit of language. It's not like a wholesome read by any means, but I was along for the ride and I had a really good time with this one. Whoa, I just loved that creepiness at the beginning. And then learning the mystery, like having the mystery unfold before my eyes. Thought it was really good. Another book that I really loved this month is Orion and the Starborn. And this comes out today. The day that I'm filming this is November 15th. Hopefully I'll be able to get this video edited and up either today or tomorrow. But Orion and the Starborn comes out on November 15th. It is a middle grade science fantasy. It's sci-fi, fantasy combined. Feels more like fantasy, but it's set in space. So a little combination of those two genres. But we follow Orion, who is always just feels a little bit different. 11 or 12-year-old little boy living on Earth. I say that because he quickly learns at the very beginning that he's not from Earth. He's coming home from school one day and gets attacked and learns that his life is in danger. His grandmother confirms that yes, his life is truly in danger and that he is not from here. So then he gets to go kind of on this adventure and this quest to figure out where he's from, wants to specifically learn about his parents. He's always just known his grandmother. So he wants to learn about who his parents are. In the process, goes to a magical school, learns that he has some powers. So in this book, the constellation Orion, the belt that goes across it is actually a little 3-planet planetary system that Orion is actually from. So it was very interesting, very sweet. I liked Orion a lot and the friends that he has both on Earth and his new home. And I was invested all the way through. This is going to be the start of a new series and I'm very excited for that. I would love for you to check it out. And if you haven't already, I did get a chance to interview KB Hoyle, who is the author of this book. So if you've missed that interview, go ahead and check it out. I will link it in the description down below. It was very interesting to hear a little bit about her writing process and the reasons why she wrote this book. Also a little bit about Owl's Nest Publishers, which she is the CEO and co-founder of. And yeah, it was a very interesting interview. I loved getting to chat with her, and I really would recommend picking up this book. It was great. Before I get into the few Historathon books I've already read, I want to talk about a little project that I was doing this month, and I read 4 books off of my Christmas book exchange cart. A couple months ago, one of you recommended that the 4 of us who do the book exchange do a bit of a Noel November, or where we kind of read some of our Christmas book exchange books before getting the new ones next month. And I'm like, that's such a great idea. And I recommended it to everybody, but then Amanda and Lindsay are the hosts of Historathon, and we all just have a lot going on this month. And so we all decided that it's not something we're going to all do together, but I had already planned on it. So I did. And how I chose which books I picked is that I ended up making a little spreadsheet of all my Christmas book exchange books, because of course I did. And I put the rating of all the books, and I chose the 2 highest and the 2 lowest rated books that I was sent for Christmas, and I read them. So I'm going to tell you about them right now. Let's start with the lowest. I was very curious if I was going to agree with these low ratings. And honestly, when I'm looking at the list, I didn't actually pick the lowest. I was going to do the 3 highest and the 3 lowest, but I ended up only doing 4 books. And so these are 2 of the lowest, but I do have one that's actually lower that I'm really excited for. So we'll see. But I did agree that these were not good. I will start with Shadow Baby because I actually DNF'd this book. This is by Allison McGee. I believe this is a middle grade, but I could not. I was listening to this on audio. We follow 11-year-old Clara, who really is struggling to find out the truth about her father, who's missing, and her twin sister, but her mother never talks about the father and the sister. She starts a friendship with an elderly man who lives in a kind of mobile home park near her home and learns about his life, but she is an unreliable narrator, and that is a trope or a plot device that I really, really just don't connect with. I can't stand it. She's a known liar. She makes up stories and then says, oh yeah, I lied about that. And it just was very frustrating to me because you never really know what's true and what's not true. It felt very disjointed, and I never got a grasp of the story and where we were going. So I couldn't. It's a very short book and a not super long audiobook, but I always was just confused when I was picking it up, and I don't like reading a book where I'm constantly confused if I don't feel like there's some kind of thread of something pulling me along. And I love a story where there's an elderly person connecting with a younger person and a friendship there. And I was hopeful for that, but I didn't care for the older guy either. Like it just didn't work for me. So I DNF'd this one. It does have a 3.46 rating, which is pretty low for Goodreads. Anything under like a 3.7, I think is pretty low in my opinion. But yeah, I didn't really care for that. So I DNF'd it, and it's going in my unhaul pile. Another one going in my unhaul pile that I had high hopes for is More Than Words by Jill Santopolo. And I also didn't like this one. This has a 3.54 rating on Goodreads. I think I gave it a 2. I did finish it, but honestly, I don't really even remember much about it. It was supposed to be this emotional, slightly like partly romantic, partly important, momentous, whatever book about this woman, Nina, who kind of realizes that the life that she's expected to live is not exactly who she really is inside. So she has this very serious relationship with this man, Tim. Her dad is the owner of these hotels, and she has always been taught that the kind of family and reputation is the most important. She has always kind of been part of the face of the company along with her dad, and expected to be and act a certain way. And she understands the repercussions of not doing that. But she doesn't really want to follow in her father's footsteps. She's very interested in politics and helps this guy with his campaign and really loves that side of her life. And of course, as she gets to know this man that she's helping to win a political office a little bit better. They strike up a friendship. She's very good at writing. She writes all of his speeches. And then she learns some information about her father. Her father, I think, passes away pretty early on in the book. And she learns some information about him and the way he ran his business that is incredibly shocking when you think about all the things that he drilled into her about reputation and doing the right thing and putting on this good face, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I just felt like disappointed in all of the characters, and I didn't feel invested. I just found that I didn't care by the end of it, and I feel like I was supposed to care, like she was trying to make me care, and I just didn't. So I would not recommend this. I don't really have a lot to say about it. I just didn't like it. I just didn't like it. And that's okay. Then we have the two that are still on my shelves that are the highest rated. So I read Almost Home by Valerie Fraser Lewis, and I really did like this one. This one had a 4.29 rating, and I think I also gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really, really good. This book takes place kind of in the midst of the Great Depression. Towards the end of it, the beginning of World War II is starting, and people all over the country are really struggling with their jobs, and many of them are moving south to work in factories and like ammunition factories and things like that, because they can no longer financially keep their homes or they've lost their jobs. But people from all over are making their way south. Dolly and her husband own this big, huge home, and they open it up to renters. And so people from all over are coming to stay in their homes. So this group of people in this home really connect with each other. There's this story of people who originally lived in this home and the people who built it. There's kind of this legendary story that the man was a river pirate and he married the preacher's daughter at the time, and then they disappeared. And so did they die? Was it something nefarious that happened? One of the couples who comes to live in the home are this husband and wife. I don't remember their names right now. They're just really struggling. He is feeling really guilty and like a failure because he isn't able to keep their home and their job. And she just really misses the relationship that they had. But she kind of becomes obsessed with this legend of the home and starts talking to people in the neighborhood and really connecting with people. And Dolly gives her permission to go up in the attic. And so she just kind of becomes really interested in this. We get to know all of the different people in the home and the ways that they connect with each other and the ways that they end up supporting each other and becoming friends and almost like family. It's almost like a found family that's forced on because of their proximity. But the whole neighborhood, and then Dolly and Cy, the owners of the home, come upon some struggles as well, and how they all band together to help Dolly. I really just liked learning about these people. I liked the time that it was set, the setting of it. I always love a found family story, and this just really worked for me. I was here for it. I wanted to go sit on the porch and drink sweet tea and lemonade and chat with Dolly. Like her and her husband were an older couple who really loved each other, and they were trying to manipulate situations to get this other couple together so that they could learn to communicate again and really reconnect. And they were able to do that. It just was very sweet. It was very sweet in a lot of ways. And then I also really enjoyed this undercurrent kind of mystery of this original couple who built the house and what happened to them. And is there a lost treasure and all of these things. It just really, it really was a lot of fun. I was along for the ride. So that was a good one for me. Very sweet. The fourth one that I read that was for my Christmas exchange cart is Calling Me Home by Julie Kibler. This one does have a 4.24 rating. And I also gave this one 4 stars. I also really enjoyed this one. I think I said earlier, I always like it when stories have like an older woman and a younger woman, or an older person and a younger person connecting. And that's what this one is. We follow 89-year-old Isabel, and she makes a connection with her hairdresser, Dory. Isabel and Dory become very close. They just really begin to develop a friendship. Dory is a younger Black woman, single mom, and then Isabel is an older woman with some secrets of her own from her past. And then one day Isabel asks Dory to drive her to Ohio. Where do they live? Texas. They live in Texas. And she asks Dory to drive her to Ohio for a funeral. Along the way, Isabel starts opening up about her story and how when she was younger, she had a almost clandestine a relationship with a young Black man in her neighborhood whose mom and sister worked in their home. And it was totally forbidden at the time, but she just fell in love with this kid and told their story along the way and what happened. And it was a fascinating read, just a lot of storytelling. And I loved the relationship between Dory and Isabel, and I gave this 4 stars, and I really loved it. I loved the surprises that happened towards the end and where the story kind of ended up, and just the kindness between these two women for each other. And Dory had her own situations, and at one point Isabel's like, we can turn around and go back if you need to, and Dory's like, no, let's keep going. And then when it just was a beautiful story of friendship and love for each other, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm glad that I read that one. But we still have 3 books to talk about. Thankfully, one of them is a DNF, so that will go by quick. I did read 3 books for my own Netgalley November / Historathon. Like I said in my Historathon TBR, I've chosen all historical books that are on my Netgalley. And actually, I don't think this one was even in my TBR. But I've read 3 books that are historical fiction. At the end of the month, I will put them all together to see if I was able to do all the prompts that are on the Historathon challenges or whatever. Because I made a TBR going from prompt to prompt, and then I promptly left that in the dust and just picked up what I wanted. So I did choose my oldest Netgalley book, and I did talk about this in my weekend vlog recently. After the Bloom by Leslie Shimo Takahara, I thought was going to be a dual timeline historical fiction, and the past timeline was going to be mainly set in a Japanese internment camp. And while that is somewhat true, it is set there. It didn't give me, I don't know, I just wasn't connected to it. I didn't like where it was going. It wasn't focused on the camp, but on these teenage relationships and kind of some rebellion that was happening at the camp. I don't know. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting. And I really didn't like the present day timeline. And I just didn't connect with the writing style. So I did read 100 pages, but then I DNF'd this one. And I did write that in my Netgalley review. So I can't, I guess, really count that for Historathon. But then one that I really did love is The Bookwoman's Daughter by Kim Michelle Richardson. This is kind of a sequel or follow-up to The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, which I read last year and really enjoyed. Cussie May is the woman in Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, and this one follows her daughter, Honey. At the very beginning of this, the first chapter was horrible and heartbreaking because of a situation with the law that happens. And I don't really want to say too much because it does somewhat spoil the first book, but it was a really tough situation with the law because of the laws at the time. Honey had to hide in the woods and watch her parents get brutally picked up and arrested by the sheriff or whatever. Honey May travels back to where they used to live, and she ends up having an opportunity to be a pack horse librarian just like her mother was. And so we follow Honey. She is a young teenage girl and kind of on her own, I guess she's 15, 16 as the book goes on. We go through a little bit of time, but I just loved her personality. I loved how caring she was and how fierce she was, how smart she was in a lot of ways, and the way that she cared for the people that were around her. And I really love hearing about the Pack Horse Library Project. And I loved seeing people fight against the norms or the prejudicial norms of the time to support and help Honey. Not everybody, but some people did. So I really enjoyed this book. I was emotionally connected to it. It did not make me cry, but I think I welled up with tears a couple times. I really liked learning about some of the other women and the roles that they played at the time. I thought it was great. I don't remember what I gave it, 4 or 5. It was a really good read. Finally, a book that I just finished also this weekend, which I also talked about in my weekend reading vlog, is The Premonition at Wither's Farm by Jamie Jo Wright. Another 5-star knock it out of the park, ghosty, creepy, intense, suspenseful read by Jamie Jo Wright. Oh man, this one had me creeped out all the way through. Both storylines, as far as I know, all of her books have a dual timeline. They're 100 years apart. And of course, there's going to be some kind of connection towards the end. But so in this one, we're in this small town in Michigan in 2 different timelines. And Perliette is in the past timeline in 1910. She's kind of a self-proclaimed healer, homeopathic, but her mom is into spiritualism and calling upon the spirits and trying to speak with dead people. And her dad has passed away. And so Perliette really is hoping for her mom to speak with her dad, but her mom always refuses to do that. Perliette butts heads over and over and over with the doctor in town who wants her to stop practicing her fakery, as he calls it. And Perliette is just really struggling. She's grieving the loss of her father, confused about things that she's hearing about God and seeking after God, but also seeing her mom and her calling out to spirits, and just caught in this place of really missing her father, wanting to know what her purpose in life is, wanting truth ultimately. So I really liked that storyline. And then in the present day storyline, we have Molly. Oh, also in the past storyline, the Withers sisters are murdered, brutally murdered. And so there's this mystery of, is this killer in our town and who is it? And Perliette is caught out at night a couple times because people keep calling on her to come help with illness in their home or different things. And so there were some creepy scenes in that timeline. And then in the present day, Molly and her husband are struggling. She has had 4 miscarriages and is really, really having a difficult time in the aftermath, postpartum and depression, and is on medication and just really just having a hard time. And she is seeing things and hearing voices and is just exhausted and doesn't want to tell her husband because she thinks he's going to have her committed. And so she keeps all this from him, which is putting a huge wedge in their relationship. He is just more practical and trying to move on with life and wants to make her happy. So they move out to the country to Withers Farm, where these murders happened in the past timeline. Then shortly after they arrive in this town in Michigan, there is a girl who is found in the ditch. Her husband, Molly's husband, finds this girl murdered in a ditch and starts off a whole slew of research and what is going on, and is there a killer on the loose? Like, her husband, is he connected to this? He's the one that found her. There's creepy stuff in the present day timeline too, for sure. I was creeped out all the way through, but I really loved how Jamie Jo Wright talked about grief with both timelines and the struggles that these women had with their faith and the conclusion of all of that. I just thought it was not cheesy at all. It was really well done and also intense. But what I loved about it with this one, as opposed to even Book of Cold Cases, because this is Christian fiction, and I know there's going to be that faith element, and I know even though the mom was a spiritualist, like I could trust, I was hopeful, and I did. I was trusting appropriately. I could trust that Jamie Jo Wright wasn't going to take it too dark or too off the deep end, or I don't know, I just felt like I was safe. Even though it was suspenseful and creepy, I also felt safe knowing where we were going. Hopeful of where we were going. And I was right. So if you enjoy an intenseful, suspenseful, slightly creepy book, but don't want it to get too far into like occult or demonic or anything like that, you're safe with Jamie Jo Wright. She's not going to go there. But there were ghosties and it was creepy. Yeah, definitely had me. So I gave that book 5 stars. That is what I've read so far this month. I would love to chat with you in the comments below. How is your month of reading going so far? Have any of these books piqued your interest? Have you been reading for Historathon or nonfiction November? Let's chat. I love chatting with you in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you for being here today. I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye.